Prince Andrew loses his royal and military titles and he'll no longer be officially known as His Royal Highness. Buckingham Palace says the prince is handing his titles back to the Queen and will continue to play no part in public life.
It's important that the problems that Prince Andrew has incurred sort of aren't bled over into the regiments that he was representing.
It comes a day after a judge in New York ruled the prince must defend an accusation of sexually assaulting Virginia Giuffre in a civil court case. The prince denies the accusation. Buckingham Palace says he will now defend himself as a private citizen. Also tonight, MI5 issues a rare alert warning of a Chinese agent operating at the heart of Westminster trying to influence MPs. The isolation period for anyone with COVID in England is being cut to 5 full days from next week.
COVID restrictions are to be eased in Wales as the data suggests the peak of the Omicron wave here has already passed.
Pro-democracy demonstrators in Sudan protesting against a military coup and facing a crackdown by security forces.
It's not a yoghurt that can be taken out of the fridge and put back in multiple times. It's really tricky.
And the king of analogy gives up his throne. Jonathan Van Tam, famous for his pithy phrases during the pandemic, steps down.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News Channel, all to play for Anfield as Arsenal take on Liverpool in the first leg of the delayed Carabao Cup semi-final.
Good evening. Buckingham Palace has announced that Prince Andrew is returning his royal and military titles to the Queen and will no longer be referred to as His Royal Highness in any official capacity. It comes after a court ruling in the US yesterday, which left the prince facing a civil case later this year against Virginia Giuffre, who says she was sexually assaulted by him 2 decades ago when she was a teenager. He has consistently denied the allegations. Prince Andrew retired from public duties in November 2019 after an interview about the claims with the BBC's Newsnight and will now have to defend the court case as a private citizen. Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
It was a day to take stock for Andrew, seen leaving his home near Windsor Castle this morning, to ponder the situation in which he now finds himself, a situation in which, for him, none of the options is a good one. The days of standing proudly on the balcony of Buckingham Palace in military uniform alongside his family, are over. His family, and particularly his elder brother Charles and his nephew William, had to put aside family feeling. The priority now was the family's protection from severe reputational damage. Just after 5 o'clock, Buckingham Palace issued a short statement regarding the Duke of York. With the Queen's approval and agreement, the Duke of York's military affiliations and royal patronages have been returned to the Queen. The Duke of York will continue not to undertake any public duties and is defending this case as a private citizen. At the same time, the palace let it be known that Andrew would no longer be known as His Royal Highness. So what does it all mean? It means we will never see Andrew like this again, riding as honorary colonel of the Grenadier Guards at Trooping the Colour. He stepped down, by mutual agreement we're told, from that position and from roles in nearly a dozen other regiments. He's also giving up roles in the Royal Navy and the RAF. In military circles there was considerable relief. The MP Tobias Ellwood is a former army officer.
The royal family has an intimate relationship with the regiments going back in history. Many of them are honorary colonels and so forth. And it's important that the problems that Prince Andrew has incurred sort of aren't bled over into the regiments that he was representing.
From sources close to Andrew, we were told he would fight on. The Duke will continue to defend himself against these claims, they said. The claims began more than 10 years ago now with the publication of this photograph of Andrew with the then 17-year-old Virginia Roberts and this photograph of him with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. In his Newsnight interview, Andrew said he rued the day he became involved with Epstein.
And that's the bit that as it were, I kick myself for on a daily basis, because it was not something that was becoming of a member of the royal family. And we try and uphold the highest standards and practices, and I let the side down. Simple as that.
2 years on from that interview, Andrew, Duke of York, second son of the Queen, ninth in line to the British throne, stands alone. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent Helena Wilkinson is in Windsor for us. And Helena, the Prince cuts a very isolated figure this evening.
Yes, he does. Windsor is where Prince Andrew lives, Rita. His home is around 3 miles away from the castle here in Windsor Great Park. And he is rarely seen out and about here, sometimes in the park, but that is about it. And since that interview with Newsnight in 2019, since he stepped back from public duties, he has led a very isolated life here. Now, he shares his home with his former wife here, Sarah Ferguson, and perhaps he is going to be turning to her in this moment. But going forward, we are not going to see Prince Andrew out and about again as a working member of the royal family. And that decision clearly designed to separate Prince Andrew's court case from the royal family's public duties. He will now focus on the case. The Queen, who should be celebrating this year her 70 years on the throne, the palace will be very much hoping that this decision about Prince Andrew will lift what was to be a very dark cloud over those celebrations. And as for Prince Andrew, Rita, going forward, he is going to be leading an even more isolated life here in Windsor.
Helena, thank you. Well, Nick Witchell joins me now. Nick, an unprecedented situation this for the royal family.
It is. I mean, a bit of context. The royal family really hasn't faced a situation such as this in modern time, with a senior member of the family, the second son of the monarch, facing an allegation of sexual assault in a court. An allegation, of course, which he denies. But the royal family have acted very quickly because the reputational risk is very considerable and very real. And I think we can detect the hands of Charles and William in all of this. It would be very odd if the Queen was not consulting them, was not taking their counsel, particularly, of course, in the absence now of the Duke of Edinburgh. They will be concerned, I'm sure, for Andrew at a human level, but they are very much more concerned for the reputation of the institution, as Helena was saying there. Now, Andrew's position regarding the regiments was plainly untenable. He has agreed, we're told he's agreed, not to use the styling of HRH anymore, and he will fight this case. He says he will fight it as a private citizen. Now, for Andrew, this must be devastating. The last bits of superstructure, of framework around him for the past 40 years have been taken away, have been stripped away. But his family are trying to protect the monarchy from any further, as it were, collateral contamination from this case.
Thank you very much, Nick. Nick Witchell, our royal correspondent. MI5 has issued a rare alert about a named individual, warning MPs of a woman who's been working as an agent for the Chinese state and trying to influence British politicians. The security service said that Christine Lee was engaged in political interference on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, said it was deeply concerning, but that the UK had measures in place to identify such activities. Here's our security correspondent, Gordon Carrera.
A figure at the heart of Westminster, with access to politicians from all parties, even a Prime Minister. But today, lawyer Christine Lee is accused of working secretly on behalf of the Chinese state. In a highly unusual move, MI5 today issued this alert to parliamentarians. They were warned Ms. Lee had been working with an arm of the Chinese Communist Party to covertly interfere in UK politics through establishing links with established and aspiring parliamentarians.
The fact that this alert has become public today in the way in which it has is really a very strong illustration of how our intelligence and security agencies have been working together to really spot and identify this type of activity, activity that could potentially do harm to our country and harm to our democracy.
There was no one here today at Christine Lee's London office, and she's not yet responded to the claims. The allegation is that she was funneling money to politicians, claiming it came from within the UK, when in fact it came from China, all in order to secure influence for the Chinese Communist Party. Former Labour frontbencher Barry Gardiner received more than £400,000 from her over 5 years. In a statement today, he said he'd been liaising with MI5 and he stopped receiving funding for parliamentary researchers in 2020, although Ms Lee's son was working in Mr Gardiner's office until he resigned today.
This is really serious. We don't play this down. I'm not running scare stories. I am genuinely concerned and shocked that this has been allowed to happen. We need to understand why and we need to do something about it. But we also have to recognise that the Chinese government poses a clear and present danger to us and stop messing around.
Today's alert came after what I'm told was a lengthy and serious investigation by MI5 here. But Christine Lee isn't being prosecuted. This isn't about spying in the traditional sense of stealing secrets. It's about influence. And the judgment was that the best way of disrupting her alleged activities was by issuing this very unusual warning. Inside British intelligence, concerns about Chinese influence have been growing in recent years. Today is a sign that those fears go right to the heart of Westminster, and we're told to expect more of these warnings in the future. Gordon Carrera, BBC News.
The Metropolitan Police say they'll wait for the result of a civil service inquiry into parties held at Downing Street and at government departments during COVID lockdowns before deciding whether to investigate. Boris Johnson apologised yesterday for attending a drinks party in the Downing Street garden in May 2020 during the first lockdown, saying he thought it was work-related. He remains under pressure from his party, with some senior Conservatives saying he should resign. Here's our political correspondent, Alex Forsyth.
There's no easy way to clean up the current situation, and since first thing, no sign of the Prime Minister. A planned public visit was cancelled because one of his family has COVID. While he hunkered down here, others spoke up for him after yesterday's apology.
He was ashen-faced, he was upset, he was truly, genuinely, heartfelt sorry for the upset and the rage that people are feeling. He gets it.
On the airwaves, there was a chorus of loyalty.
There was no question in my mind Boris Johnson was acting in good faith.
With hindsight, he regrets going out to the garden.
He has apologised, very, very clearly.
The Cabinet have shown their support, including the Chancellor, though from him it was quieter.
Mr Speaker, I want to apologise.
For many, yesterday's apology just didn't cut it. The mood among Tories is dim. Some critics are keeping their counsel for now, waiting perhaps to hear from their constituencies. Stamford in Lincolnshire is rock-solid Tory turf. Long-standing members of the Conservative Association were as one.
If he wants to be remembered as a good Prime Minister, then I think he has to consider, is it the time now to resign?
I think it would be better if he just resigned rather than waiting for a vote of confidence. I think he would get a lot more respect.
A lot of the long-serving members in the association have very vocally said that it's time for him to go.
Scotland's Tory leader has already said the same. His call for Boris Johnson to resign caused something of a party row.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, as anyone, is entitled to their opinions. I don't have to agree with them.
Jacob Rees-Mogg had called him a lightweight and questioned his loyalty. And now he's suggested lockdown rules might have been too tough at the time of the Downing Street gathering, asking today
whether all those regulations were proportionate or whether it was too hard on people.
Labour wasn't impressed. Here, frustration at the government is far from fading. Whether public or private, there is real anger across the Conservative Party at Boris Johnson. But many MPs are waiting for the findings of the official investigation before passing final judgment. Even when that's published in the next week or so, it's likely it will be the political mood that follows that ultimately determines the Prime Minister's fate. There's a lot riding on Sue Gray, the civil servant leading the Cabinet Office inquiry. Even the Met Police said today they'd wait for her findings before deciding if there's anything to investigate. Labour says the Prime Minister needs to act.
He knowingly misled, lied to Parliament, which in itself is a resignation offence under the Ministerial Code, but we're also calling for him to resign because of the damage that he's done to public trust and public confidence in health measures at a crucial time.
For now, Boris Johnson is in Downing Street. But make no mistake, this matter is far from closed. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Westminster.